Well, Victoria's opposition has put forward a motion in the upper house calling on MPs to back Australian farmers and oppose China's 80% tariff on Australian barley imports. Victorian upper house leader David Davis is leading the charge, demanding the tariffs be removed immediately. He joins me now. This is a clever motion.
Good evening, Peter.
I've got to say, yeah, good to see you. I think this is a clever motion because essentially what you're doing is you're putting the Labor Party MPs on notice. Where do their loyalties lie on this? Do they lie with the Chinese and the Belt and Road projects, or do they lie with Australian farmers when it comes to barley? Where's it at, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, the motion, as you say, was a very sharp one, just clearly saying that the House is opposed to the barley tariffs and wants them removed. Labor, of course, Daniel Andrews has been silent on this. He wouldn't utter a word against China, wouldn't utter a word against the Chinese Communist Party and its imposition of these tariffs. And this put his backbenchers and ministers on the spot in the chamber. When it came to it, they balked. They wouldn't vote against it. They spoke against it, and they spoke in a half-hearted way, but they wouldn't actually bring on a vote against it. So the motion was passed. So it's actually a unanimous vote of the upper house, and Labor's MPs have been forced to take a stand on these barley tariffs. It's clearly wrong that these tariffs are imposed, and there's well over 1 million tonnes a year in Victoria. Very significant exports out of other states, of course, but in Victoria we wanted to see a clear position, and finally Daniel Andrews has been dragged to the point where his ministers have actually had to back the motion. And so that's been carried. So that's a clear message to our barley farmers. They know we're on their side. It's a clear message to Andrews and his government. You need to fight harder. You can't go around like timid pussycats with China, the way Chinese Communist Party, the way you have in this last period. And it's a clear message to the Chinese Communist Party too that, we're going to fight. We're not going to be sitting back and rolling over and having our tummy tickled like Daniel Andrews has done in the recent times. I mean, he signed this Belt and Road agreement. No one thinks it's a good idea. The federal government, who've got the expertise on foreign affairs, certainly don't think it's a good idea. State governments, of course, should fight for the trade for their regions, for their states, but they're not well equipped with formal foreign policy expertise. And I think Andrews has made a big mistake with this. He hasn't been honest and transparent about this Belt and Road agreement. There's information that we're seeking, and he won't provide it. And that's not good enough. People have got a right to know what he's signed up to, what he's agreed to, and what was the advice that he had when he did it.
I think it's a monumental mistake. I really do. I think it's an own goal, and I think he'll be punished at the ballot box. Now, this Black Lives Matter protest that's planned for Melbourne, do you have any concerns?
Look, people are of course entitled in a general sense to protest, but how does this work at the moment with the COVID rules and COVID restrictions? It seems that the police are giving a bit of a green light to it. They're not being clear and saying, actually, this is not a good idea. You've got small restaurants that are struggling, and gyms are still not operating in Victoria. I could go on with a long list of different areas that are impacted.
No footy.
And then suddenly tens of thousands of people are going to gather. How does that work? I don't understand the consistency. If the COVID rules aren't going to be enforced evenly and consistently, I think we've got a problem. We've asked for the Chief Health Officer and the government to release all of the advice on which their rules have been based. They've refused to do that. They will not release the information, and I think they're in serious danger with this. This is inconsistency, and I think it does put people at risk. If you've got 20,000 more, perhaps, people gathering, of course it's going to be a risk for transmission.
David, I think that's the problem right now. I think Australians have done the hard yards, we've flattened the curve, but the inconsistency in messaging all the way along the line, whether it be schools, whether it be voting at an election here in Queensland, whether it be going to a funeral, whether it be playing golf, can't play golf in Victoria, can't even fish. I think that's the problem. There's rules for some and rules for others. But anyway, that's a conversation.
So it's got to be based on consistent advice. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, it has to be. The advice we're getting from different jurisdictions, different states and different territories is totally at odds in some instances. And the best example is what we see from the Commonwealth in relation to border closures compared to other states. I mean, it's ludicrous.
It's ludicrous, and they should release the advice. There's one other thing that's happened in Victoria today too. The motion that we put up on Brumbies was passed. Again, government members dragged to a position where they didn't want to be, because Daniel Andrews' plan is to begin shooting the high country Brumbies in coming weeks, a wholesale, broad-scale slaughter of them. There are real questions about how he's going around this, and we've said no broad-scale slaughter. That's wrong, and you need to pull back from that. So you've got government members then forced in the chamber to a position where they're at odds with government policy, because these are proud, magnificent animals, part of our heritage, and there's got to be better ways than wholesale slaughter.
Sure. David Davis, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.